start with our top story. Pakistan has thanked Saudi Arabia for supporting its stance on Indian-occupied Kashmir. The Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud met his counterpart Shah Mahmoud Qureshi on his maiden visit to the country. During the meeting, Qureshi said Pakistan has historic relations with Saudi Arabia and both countries are looking forward to enhancing bilateral ties. The Foreign Office said the visit is to discuss bilateral and regional issues of mutual interest. It said Pakistan and Saudi Arabia enjoy a deep-rooted and long-standing fraternal relationship. The Foreign Office said frequent high-level visits are a key feature of the relationship and serve to further deepen and broaden mutual ties. In news coming out of Afghanistan, a suicide car bomb has killed 6 Afghan soldiers and wounded 3 in the northern Balkh province. Officials say the attack targeted an army compound in Balkh district of the province. The Taliban have claimed responsibility for the attack. Shortly after the bomber detonated the car laden with explosives, a group of insurgents stormed into the compound. This set off a shootout with Afghan forces. The provincial governor's spokesman, Munir Farhad, said fighting continued for hours before the attackers were repelled. Responding to its unprovoked aggression, the Pakistani army has killed 3 Indian soldiers along the line of control. Army spokesperson Major General Asif Ghafoor said an Indian post was also damaged in the Hajipur sector. The spokesperson said New Delhi violated the ceasefire in the last 36 hours. He said 2 Pakistani soldiers, Naib Subedar Kandero and Sepoy Hassan, were martyred in Dewa sector along the LOC. He said the martyred Subedar belonged to Panu Aqil, while Sepoy hailed from Jhelum city. Now, countrywide protests against the controversial citizenship law continue in India. Activists, politicians, rights bodies and students are demonstrating against Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government. The West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee is leading a massive rally in Kolkata as an all-women sit-in continues in Delhi. Members of the Women's India movement have gathered in Bengaluru, while hundreds of people rallied in Mumbai. A procession against the act will also take place in Aligarh, Uttar Pradesh, and in the evening, I should say. Meanwhile, the government has suspended internet in Agra and Mathura till Friday evening to curb the demonstrations. In India, 51 professors of Banaras Hindu University have launched a signature campaign against the new Citizenship Act. That move comes after the arrest of at least a dozen students of the varsity for participating in a protest against the law. In a signed document, academics have requested the government to rethink the long-term implications of the act. Meanwhile, Indian police in Uttar Pradesh have tortured minors, including a 13-year-old, for protesting against the law. Children told local media they were beaten on the streets, in police vans, and then inside the police station. 25 people have been killed in the Anti-Citizenship Act demonstrations across India over the last 2 weeks. In Iran, meanwhile, authorities have disrupted internet services in several provinces ahead of planned anti-government protests. BBC reported outages, while internet monitoring service NetBlocks confirmed a drop in usage. Social media posts have called for renewed protests and for ceremonies to commemorate the dead. In November, an increase in petrol prices sparked anti-government protests across the country. Demonstrators expanded their demands to cover calls for more political freedom and other issues. Amnesty International said over 300 people were killed and thousands arrested during the days-long crackdown by security forces. In Tunis, meanwhile, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says a ceasefire must be established in Libya as soon as possible. Meeting Tunisia's President Kais Saied, Erdogan said neighboring countries are being affected from the crisis in Libya. Erdogan said he believes Tunisia will make valuable contributions to achieve stability in Libya. Turkey backs Libya's internationally recognized government led by Fayez al-Sarraj, and the 2 sides signed a security agreement last month. Libya is mired in violence since April, when Khalifa Haftar's eastern forces launched an offensive against the government to take over Tripoli. 7 people have died after a boat carrying migrants sank in eastern Turkey's Lake Van. Bitlis province officials said 64 migrants from Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan were rescued. Officials said the boat capsized as it approached the Adil Shabazz district on the northern shores of Lake Van. They said 5 people were found dead on the scene and 2 died in hospital. The lake is near the border with Iran, from where migrants regularly cross into Turkey, heading west towards Europe. Let's move on to Syria now, where 5 pro-Iran fighters have been killed by unidentified missiles in the eastern province of Deir ez-Zor. A war monitor says missiles targeted the headquarters of the 47th Brigade of pro-Iranian militias in the town of Abu Kamal. It said drones may have been responsible for the raids, which caused loud blasts. Pro-Iran militias have backed Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime in an 8-year war. According to the UN, at least 400,000 have been killed in Syria's conflict since 2011. Burkina Faso, where 11 soldiers have been killed after unidentified gunmen attacked a military detachment in center-north Burkina Faso. Officials said the military base in Soum province was attacked as soldiers were patrolling the village of Halale. Local media report security forces managed to kill 5 gunmen in an exchange of fire. Earlier, 122 people, including women, soldiers, and militants, were killed in an attack in the country. Officials said a large group of terrorists simultaneously attacked the military base and the civilian population in Arbinda. Russia has accused the United Nations of turning a blind eye towards a U.S. delay in visas for its officials seeking to travel to the UN headquarters in New York. In a statement, Russia's Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, said the U.S. has deliberately delayed issuing the visas. Zakharova said Defense Ministry officials who were due to travel to the UN Secretariat had to wait months for visa clearance. She said all this is happening with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' support, who effectively ignores U.S. breaches of the UN Charter. Earlier, Russia summoned a senior U.S. diplomat to protest Washington's refusal to issue the visas to Moscow's delegation. The UN says over 2.5 million people in the Central African Republic will need humanitarian assistance next year. In a press briefing, UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said over $400 million were required for next year's plan. Dujarric said nearly 700,000 people were displaced throughout the country. Humanitarian workers estimate that just under 600,000 people have taken refuge in neighboring countries. More than 1 million school-going children will need humanitarian assistance in education in 2020. He said nearly 180,000 children will need treatment for acute malnutrition. In the Philippines, Typhoon Phanphone has hit the central part of the country, killing 16 and affecting tens of thousands of people. Local media said over 100 homes were destroyed by the storm, and huge flooding has been reported in many areas. Authorities say thousands of people have been left stranded as ferries and flights were cancelled. With winds of 195 kilometers per hour, the typhoon tore roofs off houses and toppled electric posts as it cut across the country. The news continues after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, people across Asia are witnessing an annular solar eclipse, which is also known as a ring of fire. Crowds have gathered to watch the natural phenomenon in a number of countries, including Pakistan, Sri Lanka, India, and Saudi Arabia. Pakistan's meteorological department said the eclipse is visible all over the country, especially in Karachi and Gwadar. The solar eclipse is not a total eclipse but an annular one, as the moon won't be able to completely cover the sun. People have been advised not to look at the sun with the naked eye during the eclipse. The rector of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris has admitted there is a 50% chance the fire-ravaged landmark cannot be saved. Monsignor Patrick Chauvet said Paris landmark is still fragile and not out of danger. He said there is a 50% chance of scaffolding falling onto the 3 surviving vaults of the Gothic monument. The cathedral was unable to hold Christmas services for the first time in over 200 years. The The 12th century cathedral was under renovation at the time of the accidental April fire, which destroyed its roof and collapsed its spire. A staggering 8 million tons of plastic end up in the world's oceans every year. Much of it finds its way into the ocean from canals and rivers. Now, a local company in Amsterdam is working to remove plastic trash hidden under the city's waterways. More on that now in this report.
Plastic waste, whether in a river, ocean, or on land, can persist in the environment for centuries. According to a German environmental research company, rivers are carrying up to 4 million metric tons of plastic into the sea each year. In Amsterdam, bubble barrier technology is being used to remove the plastic from its canals.
The Great Bubble Barrier is an idea that also can catch plastics which it's under the water surface, and also the smaller pieces which the boats don't get.
The company claims the bubbles don't interfere with passing boats and don't pose any danger to fish or birds.
A bubble barrier is basically a tube that we place on the bottom of a river or canal. It has holes in it and we press air through it, and that creates a bubble curtain like you see behind me. The air brings plastics that are floating in the water to the surface, and because we place it in an angle, it redirects the natural flow of the river and the plastics that are in there to the side where we collect it and where it can be removed.
The United Nations says people need to improve the management of plastic waste.
Less plastic is flowing out to the North Sea, and otherwise we also want to give insight into the total plastic problem, because the best is of course that no plastic falls into water in the first place.
The company launched the Bubble Barrier project last month after a small-scale test. If the project is successful, they have planned to deploy it in other parts of the country as well.
Researchers say they have determined a cave painting in Indonesia, which is the earliest known pictorial record of storytelling. The painting in question was discovered in 2017 by a group of Australian archaeologists on the island of Sulawesi. More in this report.
Like many other cave paintings, this one depicts humanoid figures hunting animals. What makes it unique is that it dates back around 44 millennia.
The result was yesterday's finding. There are 4 samples. They are mainly above 40,000 years old. The exact dating for the oldest one is 43,900 years old. That was found around the depiction of the pig.
The hunters shown in the painting have animal heads. Such figures can be found in ancient cultures around the world. The researchers say this is the oldest evidence of humans' ability to imagine supernatural being.
This is one form of historical heritage of how our ancestors had actually understood literacy, meaning what they see and what they experienced are being poured in a form of rock art.
The painting's age was determined by researchers from Indonesia's National Research Center for Archaeology. Some of them hypothesized the cave could have been a religious site in the prehistoric era.
Asian stock markets are trading higher amid optimism over Phase 1 trade deal between the U.S. and China that would boost exports and corporate earnings. Investors' participation remains low following the holiday season. Tokyo's Nikkei 225 is trading 0.5% higher as shares of Family Mart rose about 1.5%. The Shanghai Composite and Seoul's Kospi Index are trading fractionally higher. Meanwhile, international oil prices gained a fraction as Russia reaffirmed its cooperation with OPEC to curtail oil production. Well, with that, you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this bulletin on Indus News.